If you're Duolingo, with over 500 million app downloads, teaching 40 plus languages, you keep pretty busy.
We have over 400 engineers here building all of the cool things that you see, but it's really important to be able to ship code without disrupting an excellent learner experience.
Given that number of engineers, how does Duolingo manage to make learning accessible to everyone, everywhere?
GitHub Copilot is very popular at Duolingo, and we learn new ways to leverage it every day to improve how we teach. Most of our engineering function is regularly using Copilot. One of the great things is how much it reduces friction. You want to make a quick change to a code base to fix a quick bug or to conform to the new style, and Copilot completes that seamlessly.
Sounds like Copilot's easy to use, but how does that help engineers make Duolingo better?
We've seen a 25% productivity increase with Copilot, and that frees up so much of your time in the day to have more thoughtful conversations and talk about your next big idea.
What would traditionally take days or weeks can happen in minutes.
At Duolingo, employees use the app every day. Let's check in with the team and see what they're learning.
I'm learning French.
And I'm learning Italian.
Copilot makes day-to-day life easier so you can spend your time thinking more about how I want to improve the experience for people learning a language.
I'm learning Chinese.
And I'm learning Finnish.
GitHub is at the center of our engineering, and it makes it easier for us to develop a more delightful experience for our learners.
I'm learning Klingon.
Really? Klingon? It seems Duolingo and Copilot are a pretty good duo. Get it? Okay. Peter, why don't you take over?
I don't want to use an editor that doesn't have Copilot in the same way that I don't want to write text that doesn't have spell check.
Hello, good morning. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever in the world you're joining us. Welcome to Friday. You made it. You made it. I hope you can hear me now. I don't think we were having some audio issues earlier. And please let me know if you are unable to hear me earlier. I think we're trying to do too many things. I had too many things open at once, but welcome to Open Source Friday. This is a GitHub production, but it belongs to you, the open source community of maintainers, contributors, and every single person that helps us keep this ecosystem alive and well. So welcome to Carlos Alberto Ruiz. I appreciate my folks that came from Open Source Viernes and came to hang out here too. This time we gotta practice our English all together. Welcome Bjorn from Germany. Welcome John. Welcome Daniel, Saya, George. Welcome Dover. Hey, from Florida. Welcome everyone. I am streaming live from my home office in the west coast of Florida. Where are you? Tell me a general area where you are. I know it's late for some of you who are joining from across the pond. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Leila, for joining us all the way from France. How cool is that? Well, we're here today to support, again, open source contributors, maintainers. We have an amazing, amazing presenter today. Our guest is, well, you don't have to guess it because you know it, is Alex Lichter. Alex is from Germany, actually. So shout out to all the German folks who just joined the stream. Alex is many things, a consultant, an engineer, but one of the things that is the absolute, top part, a contributor. He is part of the team for Nuxt.js, and we are here to talk about all the amazing things that he's done, not only while contributing to this project, but also overall open source experience. So help me out, everyone. Welcome, Sumitri from India. Let's greet Alex with a hello and huge welcome. Hi.
Hey, Andrea, thanks a lot for the amazing introduction. And hey, everybody out there, thanks a lot for having me on the Open Source Friday. I'm delighted to be here. How's it going?
It is going well. So I had a plan. I wanted to show my colleagues amazing download for this week, which is a sort of our news segment. But yeah, something betrayed me here. I think, hey, no cloud, but I think I had something open on VS Code and the computer just didn't like it. It was not sharing the sound. Yeah. But we'll try it again at the end because I do want you to hear and experience this. And in case you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel of GitHub, then you're able to get a notification every Friday and you can see it. Please share and subscribe. Please share on social using hashtag Open Source Fridays. This is your show. This is about you. And we're here to support the open source community the best way we can. So Alexander Lichter, welcome to Open Source Friday. Thank you for being here.
Of course. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward so much to talk about a bit of open source, about how people can contribute in the end. And of course, first of all, if people are not aware of what Nuxt.js is about, the project itself.
Yes. Well, why don't we start there? For those of you, and let's pretend that nobody knows what Nuxt.js is. If you don't mind giving us a TLDR, why was it created?
Yes, perfect. So it was created back in 2016. So it's quite old in a way, but it also revolutionized a bit. It grew more and more. Got a rewrite a couple of years ago. And Nuxt.js lives in the front-end world to a big part. So Nuxt.js is a meta framework. It's used to build any kind of web application that you want. And it's based on Vue.js. So for everybody who's not involved in the front development, Vue.js is one of the most popular front-end frameworks. And it's a joy to work with. So if you ever dabble into front-end, that might be a good pick. Of course, try out whatever you feel like, because they're all other amazing frameworks I really enjoy using too. I have to admit that. And yeah, Nuxt is based on Vue.js. And maybe some people ask okay, why do you actually need a framework on top of a framework? Why do we do this? If you already have something that's abstracting away, I get the question every now and then. And the idea is that Nuxt gives a few superpowers to Vue application, let's say, and it combines this with things like a very easy and seamless deployment. So the idea is that Nuxt lets you basically deploy your application anywhere, no matter what kind of platform, even on runtimes that's not Node.js, right? I don't know, let's say some platforms on the edge, like Cloudflare and Workers, and also on serverless platforms. And in addition, Nuxt enables your Vue application to use certain rendering modes. Typically, if you build a front application, you have maybe a single page application. So you have all the JavaScript, and the JavaScript basically generates the content, the HTML. That works pretty well, but it's not so nice for SEO, for example. There are a few caveats. So you can even use server-side rendering, for example, to say, hey, let's take the single page application, render it on the server for the initial request. And there are lots of other things like better caching and let's say things that make it easy, easy to fetch data, easy to hook into the framework and to even say, okay, hey, before generating the application, maybe can you do another thing? Because let's say my business requirements are a bit tricky. And then it starts with, oh yeah, if you have, let's say, a framework or library, we have trouble bending things to how we have to use them. And with Nuxt, it's a bit easier because you can hook into the certain parts and say, okay, before the generation happens, let's do something. Or before you send out the response, maybe alter the HTML and insert something. So for us, open source and freedom of choice is very important. So the idea is here also that we don't say, hey, we work best with platform XYZ. We basically say, we give you the guarantee if you, for whatever reason, want to switch to a different platform, you can do that and your deploys will still work.
I love that. Platform agnostic. So give folks the opportunity to pick what they want to use and what helps them work best. That's amazing. So when did you get involved with the project? Like, how did you come to become a contributor?
Yes, that's really funny. I became a contributor almost 6 years ago, and I started using it roughly 7 years ago. So I joined the core team in 2018 in September, and I started using like late 2017. And back then it was almost Nuxt 2, it was still Nuxt 1. We're in Nuxt 3 right now, just so it happened a lot, but not that many major versions. But Nuxt 4 will also come in the future, but maybe let's talk about it later. And back then, I originally came from the PHP universe. Like, I built my first websites with PHP. I discovered Laravel, which is also a very nice open source project and framework, and still a framework that I like to use if I write some PHP or have the requirements for that. And there I already learned, okay, like how to use GitHub, for example, how to contribute. I contributed to some documentation, for example, and even released like a few packages. And then I discovered the world of the front end, where like, okay, PHP is rendering some stuff, that's cool, but if you want to have something more interactive and some nice transitions and state management, the front end and so on, then yeah, you don't have to use jQuery. You can also use something, let's say, more modern. So there I figured out Vue is a good start for people that are not really involved in front end and like want to get some nice results fast, and still the case that it's really easy to learn if you know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And that's what I started with. And then realized, okay, it's lots of fun to build things in Vue, but then I built my whole front end in Vue, and I realized, okay, SEO is a bit tricky, so I found Nuxt. And I started using it for projects. Back then I was still a student, and I was like on the side. I had my own company, which I also still have to that day. And I started like building some websites for people, and I used Vue, and then started off, oh yeah, it's a public facing site, so it needs good SEO. And that's where Nuxt really helped. But back then, Nuxt was also rather young, let's say. So it was not super mature. And I would say nowadays it really is. And back then there were like lots of opportunities to say, oh, okay, I don't know, let's say my blog needs an RSS feed. Is there some kind of module that does that already? I mean, there are tons of NPM packages, but well, there was no distinct Nuxt module. So I thought, I need a function anyway, I can implement it, and why not open sourcing it? Maybe people are interested in that, maybe people are interested in using that. And same idea with like, oh, there is maybe a module, and I need a special functionality there, so why not add it for everybody? And yeah, that's also how my open source contribution started, more or less. And then
no way, that was your first one, the module?
It was for Nuxt. It was my first ones. Before was documentation as well, and I think even there, like I fixed, I don't know, like a Tailwind example back then, and I didn't really touch the core because for me it was still like, it was a bit difficult to get into it because I never like worked on such a big project in the end. And with a module, it's really nice to start because it's like an isolated scope. Okay, yeah, rendering an RSS feed is something you understand and you don't have to go through all the layers. So that's a really nice thing. And then back then, people from the core team got in touch. The creator, for example, Sebastian Chopin, got in touch. Puya as well was also still on the team. And they were like, hey, we see you contributing here and there. Let's have a chat. And yeah, then we started chatting. And one day, Sebastian was like, oh yeah, there's a conference in London. And back then, I started my semester abroad in Ireland. So I was like, yeah, okay, let's get over there and meet the people. And yeah, that was also one of the key moments back then, because like, okay, it's the first time at a conference as an attendee. And I also thought back then, it's so amazing that you meet all the people from the community, having that one goal, like in working with a framework, so much fun. And also meet the people you work with online in real life. That's always fascinating.
Right, all your online friends, which by the way are real friends, okay?
They are.
That sounds amazing. So did you think when you first created that module, like that you were gonna end up in the core team? Like,
no, definitely not. I never thought of that at all. It was more like, hey, okay, I use it, and maybe like other people need that too. Because in most cases, like, okay, if I can solve a problem for myself, there might be maybe 1 or 2 or 200, who knows, other people having a similar issue.
yeah.
And another thing is, I never had like some kind of supervisor or like superior senior dev that like guided me. I'm really mainly self-taught, and open source helped a lot with improving code quality, thinking outside the box, and understanding how to generalize things. Not, okay, that's my problem, but how to make it configurable for people, and so on, so on. So that was really helpful.
That's the beauty of open source. I love that your point of entry is like most people's point of entry. I needed to do a thing. There was nothing that would do the thing that I wanted to do. So I thought, well, okay, fine. I'll build the
Yes,
thing.
exactly,
That's amazing.
exactly. And
That's amazing.
it's also, it makes so much sense. Like, I see lots of people saying, oh, hey, I want to contribute to open source. Like, where should I start? And the point is, I always tell them, hey, what libraries are you using? What frameworks? Why don't you start there? And I know lots of people think, oh yeah, but contributing to like Vue or Nuxt or to Laravel, you don't have to start with like the big popular things, right? You can also say, look, why don't we contribute to like a module like I did, for example? Don't even have to build it yourself. Take a look at the module that exists, and then, oh, there might be a bug or something or a feature. They're also like good first issues marked usually. Tackle one of them. That's like the best way. And so many open source communities, they're like all very grateful for every kind of contribution. And if people are interested in, hey, I want to do it, how can I do it? So
That's true.
it's really, I can really encourage everybody, they should really go for it. If you're interested in doing that and contribute, we're all, like from a maintainer's perspective, we're all very happy for everybody saying, okay, I want to do something.
I love that. I did a talk, I mean, it's been like 5-6 years ago, about like friendly communities that you could join as a beginner contributor, and the Node.js and the Vue communities were the top two. I can remember where my data came from, maybe personal experience. Like I know a lot of folks in that same communities, and they're all like really awesome, really welcoming. So it's lovely to hear that there are points of entry for beginners. All right, let's see. Show us, how is the sausage made?
Yes. Okay. Let's dive into it. First, let me quickly switch to the website over here. Okay. So we have basically, that's the Nuxt website, the intuitive Vue framework. All right. We have a get started here. So it's really not that tricky to get started. We can even open it online, like in StackBlitz or Code Sandbox. So we want to reduce the friction to just say like, okay, you can jump into a project straight away. But for convenience, let's maybe switch straight away to the browser. To VS Code from the browser. So in here, I already prepared a few things, which is the Nuxt application you get out of the box as it is. I named the thing GitHub OS Friday Nuxt 3. And before I get started and I show you a few things, if you have anything like, okay, hey, can we do this? Can we try out that? Drop it in the chat, and I'm very happy to have a stab and to take a look at that, if it's possible in time, of course. Okay, the first thing we want to do is we install the dependencies, and that's already done here. So I use pnpm, pnpmi is done, perfect. And now we run pnpm dev to start the server. Nuxt is at the moment at version 3.10.3, and Nitro, which we'll have a look at in a little bit, is version 2.9.1. This is the server engine of Nuxt.js. And it is also, I can tell that already, it's a separate package. So you can even use it standalone, like something like Express, for example. All right, now the things warmed up. It also went pretty fast thanks to Vite, which is the underlying dev tool used. Also very lovely. And if we now have a look in the browser in localhost 3000, I will switch in a second, we'll see the following. We will have a little welcome application here that says, okay, that's the starting component, that's the starting content. And to remove that welcome page, we have to replace Nuxt welcome in app.vue. That's, I would say, really straightforward. Then we have a few more information here, like, okay, we can have a look at all the modules that Nuxt offers. That's also on the website. So we can basically take a look, okay, is there maybe, let's say, a Tailwind module? And of course there is, we could install that. And there are lots of other modules. So if there's something you want to integrate, that might be a good starting point if somebody already did the work. All right, of course, we also have some examples in the docs and also as a repository. And as usual, it's always recommended to take a look at the documentation. But for now, to code a little bit, we will not do that and just start straight away by removing that Nuxt welcome. So what we can do here is we can technically just say like, hey, folks at Open Source Friday. And we save it and we see the HMR works pretty fast. So if we go over here, see in the console, that updates rather quickly. And if we go back to the browser, we see, hey, folks at Open Source Friday. Okay. And also there, I would even put it side by side, like the updates are really, really fast. That's a nice thing. Vite is doing an amazing job here with the hot module replacement, so we can really work quickly on the application. And before we dive into, okay, how can we create pages and components and so on, we have this little thing down here, which we can move around, right? This thing I put on top here. It says 110 milliseconds, which is the speed of which the website rendered, right? In dev mode, very important. And this logo here is the Nuxt logo. And if you click on it, something opens saying, hi there, welcome to Nuxt DevTools. And maybe the one or another person that is on social media might have seen the DevTools of Nuxt already, because lots of people say, oh, they're so nice, they're lovely, and I can only second that. It's amazing to work with. So the Nuxt DevTools are basically, so there are Vue DevTools that run in browser, and the Nuxt DevTools are running in your application. So this here is inside your application. It's not part of the Chrome DevTools or similar. And here you have an overview, for example, how long your application takes to load, what do you use, which modules, plugins, which components, the Vue version, Nuxt version, and lots of other things. So it's really a key point for developer experience to take a look, for example, what pages do we have? And it will say, we don't have any. Great. Or which components are used, and so on, so on. So it's really a good, let's say, companion app to work with. And the funniest part is, it's also really powerful and extensible. So any kind of Nuxt module could even extend the DevTools by saying, hey, I add my own window. I want to do something specific with that. And in terms of powerful, technically, there's a VS Code tab here. And if you install VS Code Server, you can actually launch VS Code inside these DevTools here and change your own Nuxt application from within your application. So yeah, that's just to show, okay, technically this VS Code tab will then communicate with your terminal, with your PC through RPC calls and even change things. And the easiest way is if we click here on enable routing, it says create pages index.vue to enable routing. If you click here, this will reload. And while this will reload, oh, that was fast. So we have Nuxt routing set up successfully, current route and learn more here. And I just clicked that button. That's the only thing I did. But if we have a look in the code again, and let's see what happened here. Here, a Nuxt page was added, right, into our app.vue, into our only thing we had before. And another thing that was added was here in the pages folder, an index.vue saying Nuxt routing set up successfully, which route it is, and a link to the docs, of course. So we have lots of things that the DevTools can do to enable us in easy workflow and yeah, to just get things done very quickly, even without touching necessarily directly the files, because it can change files for us, as we've seen. All right, so far so good. Any questions so far? If there are any questions, just bring them in.
Great. No, I think we have a lot of reactions to the speed, for sure.
Okay.
That was blazing fast.
Perfect.
Amazing. I don't think I have any specific questions here.
All
so
right.
if there is anything else you want to continue to show us, this is great. And
yes,
then we can
of
dig
course.
in a little bit more.
Of course, we'll do that. All right. Then let's jump back. Maybe let's jump back into the code, while we're at it. So what we use, or what I mainly use with Nuxt.js, you can also do it differently, is the composition API with Vue 3. So we have composables like the use route composable, for example, which gives us the current route. And the use route composable is based on Vue.js routers. So on the Vue routers composable, but Nuxt adds a few things on top of that. Nevertheless, let's continue with this. We have this thing set up that works pretty well. And now we have a little bit of old-fashioned magic, because if we say here we add an about.vue and we create a new Vue component, and here we just say, once again with h1, this is the about page. Also here, very simple. Let's do that, capital T. And if we now switch to the browser again, right? We didn't restart or anything, we didn't change anything. And here we go to /about. Then it will say, this is the about page. So more or less like you can drop in PHP files back in the time, you can do the same with Vue files. And of course, the file system-based routing is nothing super new. It also existed in Nuxt for a long time, but it's still something that's very convenient. And you don't have to set up your Vue router again and again and again. Because, of course, that can be a bit annoying. All right. Of course, we can also, let's say, we do jokes here and give an ID here. So let's see what this is. We wrote ID in square brackets, and if we create another component here, then we can say route.id in the div here. And the idea is that we don't only have static sites, of course, we also have dynamic stuff. So when we say, when we say joke/abc, okay, this should show us, one sec. This should show us the ID, but it doesn't. Let's say const route is use route, and we give in routes.params.id because we want to get the ID from the page params. Then we'll jump back and see this real quick. And we see ABC, or if we change stuff, of course, things will change around. Okay, also nothing crazy. We have some route parameters we can use. That's perfect. We can also say, hey, okay, why don't we check out the query? Like if we say we want to render the query parameters to not only the part of the URL, then we can do this too. So if we switch back to the browser once again and say here query is true or something like that, we get this as well. And that's also mainly what you can do with the view router, but of course this all works with server-side rendering. So if we actually take a look at the page source here, and that's all in dev, don't forget that, so it's not like minified or anything, we see the content straight away here, like, hey folks, at Open Source Friday. So by default, things are rendered on the server with Nuxt.js. But of course, that doesn't have to be the case. If you say, you know what, I don't want to use server-side rendering, but I still want these nice file system-based routing and lots of other things we'll have a look at, then you can also say, you know what, I disabled that. So we can disable that by going back to the code, go into our Nuxt config.ts, where also the DevTools are enabled. And here we can say SSR false. And this way we disable the full server-side rendering. So if you want to build a plain old SPA, you can do it with Nuxt too. Like Nuxt is always seen as, oh, we can do server-side rendering and static site generation, all these fancy things. But if you want to do plain old SPA, that works. Because in the end, we want you to build what you need. You don't always need to render stuff on the server. And another thing that you can do is we have a feature called no scripts. And if you set that to true, then actually you don't have any kind of JavaScript on the page rendered. So let's just do this real quick, right? No scripts too. And if we now go back to our browser here, I open the browser, the DevTools, and if we refresh that and don't cache it, we see, we might have to deploy it in production though, because in dev mode it might still render it. That makes sense. Nevertheless, let's do it real quick to actually show that. Let's build a production build. Let's do pnpm build. So all the things will now be served for production. Then we take this and say, oh wait, maybe let's enable SSR before, because an SPA without any kind of JavaScript will just give a blank page or a loading spinner. That's not really helpful. So let's output that, and it runs on port 3000 now. And if we now refresh the page, and I'll show you the browser now. If we now refresh it, it's the same site, just in production. We see all is rendered, and it's only the HTML and the fav icon, which is, well, cached. So no JavaScript here, right? Nothing, zero. And now you say like, okay, we have this mighty framework. Why would we disable JavaScript for the whole page? We want to have some interactivity. And the good part is you don't have to do it for every page. You can say there is a page that you don't want to have JavaScript enabled. And this works the following. In here, let's start the dev server again, pnpm dev. You have something called route rules. So you can say route rules here, and then you define a page. So let's say no JavaScript. And for that URL or for that path, or if you say like, okay, I want the child path, so no JavaScript, and then you can define a glob. So I say everything below that. I want to enable, and here it's called experimental no scripts. And in here you say, okay, I want to enable this, and everything that's in this no JavaScript route, that will not get any JavaScript rendered. So you can also have this fine granular overview over pages that you want to have, for example, server-side rendered without JavaScript. And you can even apply things like caching. So you can even say, okay, ISR, incremental static regeneration, true. Or you can say, please pre-render that page for static site generation. That also works on a page or on a route basis. And another thing you could do is you could even say, yeah, we disable the SSR only for this page. And the route rules really enable us a truly hybrid mode. Like you can define for whichever paths the rules that you need. And that's really helpful because sometimes you say, oh, I have some landing pages in a project, I have a dashboard, and I have lots of dynamic data. So you don't really want the same mode for all of them. And with route rules, you can define that as you want. And if you say, yeah, you know what, it's nice, no JavaScript and so on, but maybe, you know what, maybe let's do something I showed today once already. Let's say we define the tab title, right? And here we say open source Friday at GitHub. Okay, that's very easy. That basically really just say, define the meta tag for all the pages. And it should be the same. It's like the default. If we have a look at how this looks like real quick in the browser, we see over here, open source Friday at GitHub. Okay, straightforward. What we can do now though is, because we're in development, we can say, you know what, let's override the default, and that applies to the whole config. We can say $development here, and $development, they say app head, and we set a title and say dev mode at GitHub. For example, we save this, we have a look back in the browser, and we will see dev mode at GitHub. And the best part is, if we would deploy it now to production, and let me very quickly run the production build and start the server, then you will see that in the production build, the title is still the default title. And if we refresh it now, you see it's open source Friday at GitHub. And that's one of the examples to say, okay, we are all aware sometimes you want to not show some caching rules in development, because why would you cache stuff there necessarily? We want to have different settings, and you don't have to check for the environment here because, well, if you build it and they don't like set testing or something, then it's in production. If you run a dev server, it's in dev. And yeah, as usual, if there are any questions, I'm very happy to answer. If you're like, hey, let's have a look at data fetching, then we can do that.
Very cool. Well, I have a question. Well,
yes.
It's not really a question from the chat, but someone commented, and I'm sorry, let me, Ashke, Kathy, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, about debugging and Nuxt as being one of the disadvantages. I mean, I guess you do have the dev tools. You can use the browser dev tools. What else can you do? Like what other techniques you can use to debug? So we can support Ashke.
Yes. So of course, it depends a bit on what kind of issue you want to debug. Like especially the dreaded hydration issues, but that applies to every kind of server-side rendered page. They are tricky. If it's about Nuxt in general, what I like to do besides using the dev tools or just smashing in a debugger, you can use, for example, in VS Code, the JavaScript debug terminal, and then set debuggers, and then it will stop. So that's also very helpful. But yeah, other than that, if you have a certain use case, like, okay, I had trouble debugging this and that, I'm very happy to give you some more guidance on that. It's like that might be better. But yeah, that sadly really depends. And I agree with like every kind of layer of extraction. It's a bit of a downside. It's trickier to get into the code. And there's one thing that can make it a bit hard and a bit easier though. Maybe I will go into that before showing a bit more code. So there is Nuxt, as we've seen, and Nuxt is based on various other modules. So maybe let's open the browser real quick. I will quickly show this here. So there's an Nuxt.js organization, and let me quickly open that, called Unified or Universal JavaScript Tools. And the idea is that here are lots of packages that are used to build meta frameworks. Not only Nuxt, but so originally came out of the Nuxt ecosystem, but they used in other frameworks too, like Solid Start, for example, like Analog and Angular. Tanstack Start, which will come up soon, will also use some of these. And the idea is that in Nuxt 2, we had lots of functionalities in the core, and it made them very hard to test sometimes and also tightly coupled. And with the rewrite back then to Nuxt 3 and also during Nuxt 2 already, the idea was to like extract some of these utilities. That's also how eventually the server engine, Nitro, that as I said, you can also use standalone, get created. And it's really powerful because, of course, these are isolated packages serving a different, like a single purpose, and you can test them easier. The downside is, of course, if you debug stuff, then you might jump from package to package to package. So that can be a bit daunting at first, but the good thing is it's all really traceable. And then you might see, oh yeah, because that package is handling things differently, that might be a problem in there. And it's easier to write a test case for, to reproduce it, and so on and so on. But I think mainly this is a big advantage, but I can also see people, especially that are not familiar with all these packages, see that as a disadvantage. So if we say Nitro, for example, is based on another package called H3. So we have that over here, which you really can compare like as a minimal connect like HTTP framework. And once again, then you jump from Nuxt to Nitro to H3, which is super interesting because they also have a different purpose and they're all nicely composed together. But for debugging, that can be a bit daunting at first. But also there, I think if we really need help, as in want to know what's going on, there is a lovely Discord. It should also be linked on the Nuxt site itself. I hope it should be. Let's see down here, I think. Yeah, there. The Discord. So discord.com/invite/Nuxt. There's a lovely community. I'm also very active there myself, answering various questions. So if you have any there, we are all very happy to help out and figure out stuff. And there's one more thing created. Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, let's take a look, please. And I'm gonna find the link to the Discord server while you
Perfect.
show us
I'm also happy to put them in the channel as well.
Perfect.
Good. And there's one more thing called H3 Relations. So this is also pretty interesting. This is made by Esteban, who is the contributor for the website of Nuxt.js and also various other libraries. And here you basically see how the things in Nuxt.js are connected. So how Nitro, for example, is connected to all the other packages. And you can, of course, say, okay, you know what? We have some shortcuts that are really lovely. This is, of course, all open source. You can see that. You can say, let's just show a few because there are all too many. Let's just, clear everything and just show unstorage, unimport, unhead, and listen, for example. And there you see, okay, unhead, for example, has no hard dependency. Listen has some other dependencies and other things, and so on and so on. So it's a bit easier to see which package is using which. And of course, then you can also have a look if you double click and say, okay, what is unstorage? Which dependencies? You can take a look there as well and go straight away to unstorage as well. And then you see, okay, unstorage, for example, is an async key value storage API with lots of drivers. This is, for example, what's used for the caching I mentioned before to say, hey, you can cache in a file system, you can cache in memory, but you can also cache in a KV store like Virtual KV store, like Microsoft Azure, and so on and so on. So there are lots of options once again. And of course, there are all documentations about that and all the drivers over here. And of course, you can also create your own driver if you want to. But yeah, that I will also put that link in here. Will also make it a bit easier to look around all the packages because there are lots of things. If you have lots of capabilities, you also need lots of things that are isolated and you can test. But yeah, I hope that helps. And if there's a question, I'm very happy once again to answer them.
It absolutely helps. I love that that site. I'm gonna share. I share it on the chat as well. That we share here, so you can go and see the relations. There's a question about from Dylan Hall. Is this done using e-charts? More about the.
I haven't personally dug into the source code yet because I didn't build it. But as it's open source, we can even have a look straight away what it's using. And I have a very quick look. It's using Viz data apparently.
Very cool. I love that. I was just talking to a colleague today about creating something like that for our events. So, but it's different. Not to look at dependencies and look what packages you can compatible, but for people, so that you can have a visual representation of who you're connected with and get help. So cool.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, same idea, right? So definitely, that could definitely be useful as inspiration because it's a really nice thing, and it didn't took weeks or months to build, right? That's the best thing. With all the toolings, it works pretty quickly.
Very cool.
And it's open source.
And it's open source. We do have a question from Mateus, and thank you so much for
Yes.
being here, Mateus. Could you explain the different strategies available in Nuxt.js for fetching data, like async data fetch and plugins, and how do you decide which method to use in different scenarios?
Of course. First of all, they're like I will go not too deep technically, but I will send a link once again to a video I made exactly about that, because I think that's one of the pain points people diving into Nuxt in Vue. And first of all, the most important part to understand are composables. So maybe let's have a look into what composables are and how they are used. Let's jump into the code. All right. So if we have, for example, that composable here called useRoute. Composables are usually prefixed with use or sometimes also on. And the idea is composables should only be called in a Vue or Nuxt context. So for example, if we have the script setup here, useRoute should be called here. If you have, let's say, a button, right? And you say, you do something at click. For example, very common, you like submit a form or you fetch a data. Then you have something, let's call fetch data a function here, right? And if we create a function here called fetch data, then in this function here, we don't really have a context based on Vue, because the context is, okay, the button event handler was clicked. We're not really in the Vue context anymore. And in here, no composables should be used. Instead, registering composables before and then using their function. So for example, here you can use route. That's fine. You can do whatever you want here. But what you shouldn't do is you shouldn't do const whatsoever equals useRoute. You shouldn't use useRoute here. And that's a very important thing to remember. Composables are always there to run in a Vue context. Now with useRoute, it doesn't make that much sense, but let's do the following. Let's actually fetch some data. So in Nuxt, we have two ways of fetching data, or two composables to be built in, and there's one more thing. So we have useFetch. Maybe let's do the same, but in jokes index, or let's call it random.view. Let's fetch a random joke in here. Let me quickly bring that back so it works again. And in here, okay, a random joke. So the idea is we want to show in maybe a div, we want to show some joke here, and then we have a button to say on click, we want to say fetch joke basically. And then we say fetch joke. Okay. So how we do that? Well, first of all, we need to get the joke from somewhere. And I really like the icanhasThatJoke.com API. So we can use this. And the API is pretty simple. The only thing you have to do is you have to send a GET request. And you have to send a GET request and make sure that the headers are sent to accept application JSON. So what you would commonly do is you could use the fetch API to do that, right? But the fetch API is very lovely, and we will use that. The problem is the fetch API is a bit low level, and we also want the data to be available when using server-side rendering. So let's do that. And also let's spin up the dev server again, not the prod build anymore. So we have a thing called useFetch. That's a composable once again, and we can pass a URL in here. So let's pass the URL of that API. We don't need the /API. And after that, here we can say headers, and we can, for example, say accept application JSON as the API asked it to. And now we can evade this whole thing and say const data. And the data is technically the joke, more or less. Let's see where this gets us. Also, we don't really have the fetch joke right now, so let's just make this a no-op for now and do that later. We do a to-do here. Okay, so far so good. Let's check the browser and let's have a look on what this actually will give us. I will switch in a second, and I will switch now. Okay, so here we have the joke already. So if we refresh the page once again, the joke is straight away there, right? And the button doesn't work yet, but we have the content. You also see, okay, it's joke.joke. All right. So maybe in the code, let's switch it up again and make sure this is actually joke.joke. There are multiple ways to do that. One option would be we can say we create a computed property, say this is the raw joke, for example, as data. and we say const joke is a computer property, so basically a value depending on another value. And because composables are usually related to reactive state, this data here is a ref. So we don't know what it is yet, right? It's unknown. So for now, as we use TypeScript, we are a bit cheeky and just say any for now. And it says it's a ref. That's a view term for reactive reference, including any. Of course, we can type that properly. We can say, okay, it has a joke, which is a string, and it has a status, which is a number, I guess, and an ID, which is a string. So that's also fine. So we're not that cheeky anymore. And now we have to say raw joke.value. If we want to access the value of ref, we always have to use the .value and joke. So now TypeScript is already nice to me, saying, oh, it could be null, right? And it makes sense. If that call here fails, data might be null. It won't throw an error. We have an error ref instead. We can have a look at, say, okay, if error is not null, then there is a problem. There are also other things like what's the status of the request, for example, to say, oh yeah, the status could be pending, it could be idle, and so on, so on. So nice for loading state. And another thing which is really helpful is the refresh function, also known as the execute function. They're the same, where you can just re-trigger that call. Let's start by adding that, seeing what the joke gives us now. So let's switch back to the browser and have a look. And here we go. That looks pretty fine. We have a joke. We don't have the whole JSON anymore. And if we refresh, that works. And very importantly, once again, very important, this is in the server rendered content here. So useFetch and also the other composable called useJSON-data, which we'll have a look in a bit, they both make sure that the data is transferred from the server to the client, because otherwise, well, how would the server know what that joke would be? The client, what the joke would be. So this is very important to remember, that it is in here. We have this Nuxt.data application JSON part, and in here the joke is actually encoded, and actually the whole data. So far, so good. We now used useFetch successfully. We used it to render some data, and we can do the same with another composable. But first, maybe we implement that fetch joke here. And this is very easy because we can just use that refresh function. So we just remove this, and we also don't do error handling here, and we save it. And yeah, we can do this. That's also correct. And if we go back to the browser now, then we can click fetch joke, and it will refetch the joke on the client side, of course, that we'll see here again and again. So now we have that. If we really don't need server-side rendering, or more importantly, if we actually have some user interaction. So let's say I want to submit a form, or yeah, like posting data is the classic way. Another option is on button click, I want to do something. So what's very common mistake I've seen, but also the video like targets, is that you have some kind of submit function, and then you have some state somewhere that you want to put in here. And in the submit function, you call useFetch. And that is a no-go. This is really something you shouldn't do, because useFetch is a composable. It should be called on the top level or another composable, right? And now you say, but wait, I call it here, but I use this fetch joke down here. That's also not okay, right? And the thing is, no, this is fine. As long as you call the composable on the top level, you can use everything it offers in the functions. That's totally okay. So if you have the submit function or fetch new or whatever, and we call refresh here, or in this case, fetch joke, this is fine. This is okay. But please do not call like use fetch something here. For that, you would use something that useFetch uses under the hood, but you don't need the composable part. You don't need anything to be reactive. You just send a one-off thing and it's good. And you also don't have that view context. So what you want to do here is instead, if you really want to have a form submit, so maybe let's make that more clear, form submit, you use $fetch. And $fetch is more or less a wrapper around the fetch API. It's once again another package that comes from Nuxt.js, which is called ofetch. So in here, we have the package called ofetch. And this is exactly what is auto-imported, what I mentioned. It has lots of features, like it supports automatically parsing responses like JSON, because we didn't have to say JSON parse or anything. Same idea with stringifying. You can retry things, you have interceptors, and so on and so on. So lots of cool features, and more or less like a very quality of life wrapper around the Fetch API. And this is exactly what you should use when you want to submit forms. There's also a second way where you can use Fetch to submit a form with a post request. That's also mentioned in the video, but I would usually recommend to stay with that pattern. And there's one more thing, which is called use async data. And interestingly, I also last week took a look at use async data versus use fetch. And the idea is that use async data is more or less, so just double equals, use fetch. It's more or less the same, but use async data lets you choose what kind of fetching library you use. So if you have, I don't know, something like Axios, because you're migrating a project or you really like Axios, you can use that. If you have another library you want to use, or you build your own repository pattern, for example, you can use that there. So use async data plus $fetch is more or less what use fetch is doing. So you could technically say use async data. And in here, you have to provide like an async function or something that returns a promise. And in here, you can do the fetch to some URL. And you can also set up your headers and everything here. Well, not here, in the fetch. That's very important. Because the use async data composable basically just says, I have some async function. You can even just do like promise resolve or something in there. And I get some data. How I get them, I don't mind. Use fetch is really saying, I want to do it call with $fetch. That's why like this and this is more or less the same. There are a few things that use async data doesn't have, like the whole quality of life part with use fetch can even watch certain properties automatically. Like if you pass in something reactive, then it will redo the call if something changes. That's also why sometimes people trip over, oh, I get an error, and now every time I change something, the request will be updated because I changed the body. And that's one more reason why $fetch is a good idea here. So yeah, this is more or less the summary of the data fetching part. I hope that was insightful. And once again, if there are any more like deep questions or in general questions, I'm very happy to take them. And while we're at that, sorry, yes, Andrea, go for it.
No, go ahead, Alex. Thank you. Thank you, Mateus, for the question. And just to encourage folks, if they do have any more questions, to drop them. But go ahead and finish that thought. Were you going to show us something else?
Okay, yes. While we're data fetching, I actually want to see show something very cool. So if like lots of people probably use something like tRPC, which is a pretty amazing thing. But what we can also do with Nuxt is we can get end-to-end type safety if we use the server engine. So there is usually, very commonly, I think there is a server folder usually. I will create this real quick. And in that server folder, you can set up an API endpoint. You can create anything you want. So let's say we do open source.ts here. Then we can create an event handler, which basically just says, okay, there's an event, you should do something with it. And here we return some data. Let's say data is awesome because open source is awesome. And now what we can do, maybe let's do that once again on another page. Let's say we do it e2e.view. We create a view component. And now if we type use fetch and save this properly and very quickly reload the window. This is sometimes my IDE, but I've seen people doing that every 30 seconds. There was a fun tweet about that recently. So if we use fetch, then we can actually get full type safety for exactly that API endpoint. That's and same with $fetch actually. Same with $fetch. So let's say const data equals useFetch, and we should get API open source here. I'm not sure why not, but I will very quickly restart this to double check, because Nitro, the server engine, in the end generates our the types of what is returned over here. So Nitro knows what the event handler might want to return. And on the other hand, Nuxt can use these types to actually figure out what it is. So in here, now we have it. We can do the same thing again. We even get the auto-completion for the URL, API open source. And then we know, okay, data contains something data that's a string. So we know what it is. And if we would even do, I don't know, as const or something, then we would even see this is read-only data is awesome. So even without using TRPC, as long as you use the Nitro API endpoints for your backend, and you can still use it as like backend for frontend. So you can even call your own other backend API endpoints there. As long as you do that, you have free type safety. And that's, I think, a pretty cool thing, even without using any kind of fetching library.
Thank you. And thanks again, Mateus, for the question. And I think they definitely had a much better grip of data.
Perfect.
So thank you so much for going in such in-depth detail.
Of course.
And actually, to answer your question, which is not a question, but it is a comment, Alex does have their own YouTube channel and their own Twitch. And I'll go ahead and share them once again on the chat. So folks,
Perfect.
don't be shy. Go ahead and click a subscribe to those channels so that you can get even more insights like this. Let's see. And thank you so much, Anderson, for setting the link to the Getting Started guide to the documentation. Appreciate it, Anderson.
Very
All right,
nice.
let's see. And we do have a question for Anderson. And I think, oh my gosh, Alex, I'm so sorry. I was like 45 minutes and we're going on an hour now. So
I know.
I apologize.
No worries. No worries.
If you don't mind, let's get one more question. This one from Anderson, and then we can wrap up the stream.
Yes.
Let's see. Is there a way to connect for connecting to maybe from Nuxt?
Yes, a database. So
database, yeah.
Yes. So this is particularly interesting because there are tons of ways. So you can connect if you really need a database and not a KV store. A KV store, we already talked about it. You can connect through unstorage. I did a little demo where I did it with like a Cloudflare Worker KV store to save like all the jokes I just shown actually. That's pretty straightforward. If you need a full database, there are a couple of options. With Postgres, it's or like also with like Mongo and so on, it's a bit straightforward. You can either use their SDKs, you can use an ORM like Prisma or Drizzle, for example. And a new release, once again, out of the Nuxt.js ecosystem is DB0, it's called. And I will show it once again in the browser. So there's DB0 that was released officially and non-secret, not private, a week ago at Vue.js Amsterdam. And it's a lightweight SQL connector. So the idea is that it's still in early stage, it's very important, but it works fine. It can be integrated with ORMs, and you can connect your SQL database through, for example, that package. And then that should also work pretty well. Easily with SQLite, but anything else as well. So even with like, Cloudflare D1, of course, so all the edge things are supported. Neon, any MySQL, PostgreSQL stuff works as well. But other than that, I think any kind of ORM like Prisma, as I said, Drizzle, Superbase is also a good option. Is valid, I would say. So I think that was a quick one.
Thank you so much, and and I'll go ahead. I'm sure on your YouTube channel, you probably have a video speaking about this, maybe. And if not, you can make one.
I just noted the idea down. Yeah.
There you go. Perfection.
Lovely.
Thank you so much to everyone who's joined, and thank you for the question. Actually, I mean, there was one more question about differences between Vue and Astro. I mean, both great frameworks. I mean, I guess it really depends on what your use case is. Not sure if there's anything top of mind, Alex, that you can add.
Well, I think Astro, especially with the island architecture, is pretty cool that you say only the active parts, they have to be hydrated. At Nuxt, actually, we do the other way around. We have something called server components. It's not exactly like React server components, but the idea is that you can render some, like, let's say, static things on the server and you don't have to hydrate them. So instead of Astro saying, oh, the only interactive parts will be hydrated, we say, we do everything for now, and things you don't want, you can push away. That's experimental, but that's, I think, one of the similarities, but a bit another way around. But other than that, as you said, Andrea, both great frameworks, both worth trying, and see whatever fits the needs. Yeah.
Definitely. So thank you again, Ashra, for the question. Folks, don't forget to follow Alex on Twitter. Definitely subscribe to that YouTube channel because there is a wealth of knowledge there. Amazing.
Trying to push
Thank
out every
you.
week.
I appreciate that. This is great. This is how we learn. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Alex, do you have anything coming up that you'd like to share with our audience?
Coming up, well, there is actually, if you're into Vue, there is something I want to share because it's a podcast coming up with Michael Thiessen, also very popular in the Vue ecosystem. And the podcast itself is called Deja Vu on dejavu.fm.
I like
So
that.
a little wordplay there. The first episode will come out still this month, probably more towards the end. But yeah, I think that's one thing. Other than that, I would really like to share our contribution guide actually as link in all chats as well. So if you want to contribute to Nuxt, as in the ecosystem modules, or also in Nuxt.js, there's a really good list that like, okay, how we start, what actually would help, and also very important, don't focus on code only. Feel free to add things to documentation, examples, try each issues. This is all super helpful.
Wonderful. You hear it first here from one of the core contributors. So you're open to all types of contributions.
Yes.
And you have a community guide. You have a Discord server where people can ask questions and help one another. So this is awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to leave the guide up on the screen so that we get more folks to go ahead and take a look. And you can find Alex on Twitter. All the links are in the chat. But before we go, I'll be sure to share them one more time. Alex, thank you so much. I know it's super late for you. Well, kind of.
It's almost 8. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. No, but thank you. It's Friday. Listen, like, I appreciate you spending your Friday evening with us.
Oh, I'm very happy to spend Friday evening with open source. After it, I have to jump back into my thesis that's done and like have to be submitted in a couple days. So that's a good one.
Are you able to share what your topic is for your?
Actually, yes. It's about comparing server-side rendering capabilities of JavaScript frameworks. So it's pretty related.
There you are.
And there's still a lot of work to do, though. But I'm confident I'll make it.
Okay. Well, we better let you go so you get back to that, doctor. But thank you so much for being here, Alex. Again, I think that's one of my most favorite screen share demos that I've seen in this show. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you going in such depth and thoughtful detail for the questions. So thank you. And thank you everyone who joined. Thank you. Thank you. So we will see you next time in the next Open Source Friday next week. For those of you, I have to like plug in for the Spanish speaking family. Remember that you can also join our Open Source Viernes stream. And I want to leave you with Christina's video because I'll be doing you a disservice if you don't watch this. So we're going to continue the stream until the video is over. Take this time to network. Drop your GitHub links, drop your YouTube channels, subscribe to this channel, and subscribe to Alex's channel as well. Alex, you have to come back, please.
I'm very happy to. Anytime. Just let me know and I'll be back for sure.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Emmanuel, Nick, Chirag. Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Mateos, again for the super thoughtful question. We'll see you next Friday on the next Open Source Friday. Take the rest of the day off. Just do it. Just do it. Take care now.
For Enterprise, Stable Diffusion 3, the White House wants you to stop coding in C and C++, and a pick of the week that makes a hacker tool into a Nintendo Wii controller. All that and more on this episode of The Download. Welcome back to another episode of The Download. I'm your host, Christina Warren, Senior Developer Advocate at GitHub, and this is the show where we cover the latest developer news and open source projects. Please like and subscribe. And my shirt this week is from OpenAI's Dev Day back in November. And you know, that was the Dev Day that took place like a week before that weird 5-day period where CEO Sam Altman was ousted as OpenAI's CEO, and then the internet, or at least my part of the internet, couldn't stop talking about it. Yeah, so that's where this is from. And if Sam had not been reappointed CEO, then this thing would probably be a collector's item. but as it stands, it's just a crew neck with a good story. So that's it. All right, we've got a ton of news to get into this week, so let's do that. All right, first things first, is that GitHub Copilot for Enterprise is now generally available. And I know that most of the people who are watching this are not the people making the purchasing decisions for the companies they work for, but if you do control enterprise spending, hi. But hopefully this is a tool that some of you might come across in your day job in the future. And so GitHub Copilot for Enterprise was announced back in November, and we've been testing it with select customers since then. And like I said, now it's generally available. And like GitHub Copilot and GitHub Copilot for Business, GitHub Copilot for Enterprise is your AI coding assistant, except now it can do some things that enterprise customers have been asking us for. And so that includes fine-tuned models based on your organization's code. And fine-tuning is actually going to be launching soon so that you can customize Copilot so that it's going to give you better results for your organization. But GitHub Copilot for Enterprise also integrates with github.com so that you can use the chat feature to ask questions about your code base or docs or knowledge base. And it can also be used with pull requests, basically to analyze their diffs in the PR so that reviews can happen more quickly and effectively. There are a lot of other features too. I've got links in the show notes and description to the blog post, the docs, and a great video that my pal Christopher made showing off GitHub Copilot for Enterprise. So check all that out down below. And speaking of fine-tuning and customization, Nicole Choi wrote a great blog post on the GitHub blog that covers a lot of the best practices around fine-tuning LLMs for your own needs, including what we do with GitHub Copilot for Enterprise. And so I've got that link down below too. While we're talking AI, let's talk about some of the announcements that have happened in the space over the last week. So first, Stability AI announced that Stable Diffusion 3 will be coming out soon. It's being tested in early access for now, but Stability AI says that it is committed to the open model. And similar to OpenAI's Sora, Imad, who's Stability AI's CEO, says that Stable Diffusion 3 uses a new type of diffusion transformer. And the results that are being shown off, and look, as always, these are going to be very cherry-picked to look as good as possible, but these results do look really, really good. And we'll be talking more about Stable Diffusion 3 and the various tools and front ends for that the community develops once it comes out. But I've got the Stability AI blog post linked down below, as well as some other statements that Imad has made on Twitter. And speaking of open models, Google announced Gemma, which is its family of lightweight, state-of-the-art open models that it says were built from the same research and technology that it used to create its commercial Gemini models. And similar to Meta's Llama models, these aren't strictly open source, but Google notes that the terms of use permit responsible commercial usage and distribution for all organizations, regardless of size. So that's really cool. So the models are available to download directly, or you can use them on Kaggle or Hugging Face. But the thing that might appeal to a lot of AI devs is the Gemma.cpp, lightweight standalone C++ inference engine for Gemma that Google has released on GitHub. And Gemma.cpp was inspired by tools like Llama.cpp, which Andre Karpathy created based on Meta's Llama models. And that has been implemented in dozens of tools. And so it was really cool to see something similar to this coming first party from Google. I really, really like that. And I expect tooling like Ollama and others to incorporate Gemma.cpp in the future, which I think is fantastic. I've got links to Google's blog about Gemma, as well as Gemma.cpp's repo down below. And honestly, I feel like the more open or open source models that we have, the better. So I really like seeing this. So kudos, Google. Speaking of C++, which is what Gemma.cpp uses, the United States White House wants developers, or at least developers of government apps, to move away from C and C++ and embrace memory-safe programming languages like Rust or Go or Java instead. There's a whole government report about this too. It's from the White House Office of the National Cyber Director. And if you've heard about this, if you've heard about this report, it's probably because your friends who develop in Rust and insist on letting you know that they use Rust have sent you the link 500 times over the last few days. At least that's how I've heard about it. Look, I don't have any strong opinions about whether businesses should or should not use C or C++. I think for newer projects, it probably makes sense to use something, like Go or Rust or even C# or Java, just to get more modern tooling and frameworks. But I personally just find it very funny that a government report is out helping fan the flames of the language wars. I appreciate that. Anyway, I've got a link to that report down below if you want to give it a read or, use it to antagonize your non-Rust using friends. And now it's time for both my GitHub project spotlight and pick of the week. all in one. So this time I want to highlight the Flipper Zero, which describes itself as a multi-tool device for geeks. And I've got one and I love it. And actually how Flipper Zero describes the device on their site is that it's a portable multi-tool for pen testers and geeks and a toy-like body. It loves hacking digital stuff such as radio protocols, access control systems, hardware, and more. It's fully open source and customizable, and you can extend it to in whatever way you want. Like I said, I love mine, but what is even cooler is that there's a new video game module for the Flipper Zero powered by the Raspberry Pi. And with this module, you can create a Nintendo Wii-like controller for controlling games or other types of content you make, complete with a gyroscope and accelerometer. And the video game module is powered by the Raspberry Pi RP2040, which is the same thing that's in the Raspberry Pi Pico. And because of that lineage, there are already tons of open source games and tools that will work with it. And even better, Flipper Zero maintains a GitHub repo with firmware and tooling, and even a game engine. And their blog post points out the project Scopy, which turns the Raspberry Pi Pico into an oscilloscope. And that works with the video game module too. So I love that. I love projects and hardware like this. There are some legislators in some countries out there that are trying to shut things like this down, which I think is super lame. So I just wanted to highlight this device and the open source software around it because I think it's super cool. So I've got links to the Flipper Zero blog, their GitHub repo, and some other fun compatible projects in the show notes in the description. Have you used a Flipper Zero? If so, let me know your experiences in the comments or let me know what you think about anything else that we covered today. We'd love to hear your thoughts. That's going to do it for me. If you like this episode, go ahead and give us a like. It helps the algorithm. And go ahead and subscribe to GitHub's YouTube channel for all of your nerd needs. See you next time.